Chapter 9. Be gentle unto all men. And the servant of the Lord must not strive, but be gentle to all men. 2 Timothy 2:24. The beginnings of King's Garden rushed by with such force, and after a time, all the leadership at King's Garden realized the need to stop and put in place important protocols. When we all moved into the property, we were inexperienced and none of us had the wisdom about how to lead such a large and multifaceted organization. Cracks in the foundation began to make themselves apparent. For instance, in those first several months, we had no regular procedure for accepting workers. No one received a proper interview. As a result, some workers came who were not called of God, and things happened, some amusing, others tragic. One lady asked if a friend of hers could come to the garden to work. Soon after this friend came, we had a fire on the top floor of the administration building where this girl had her room. The fire started late at night. She reported seeing the smoke, and we all commended her for reporting the fire so promptly. However, when the fire marshal came out to investigate, he asked who had reported the fire and requested to speak to the young lady. It was only a short time later that he came back and told us she was the one who had set the fire. She had done this in order to call attention to herself. Another incident which proved we needed to be more careful in selecting our workers happened one afternoon when Mike was out of town. I was sitting in the office peacefully typing when I heard a loud commotion in the hall. I hurried out to see what was the matter and saw our cook chasing his helper down the hall with a butcher knife in his hand and shouting, "I'm going to kill you." The same cook would only serve soup for lunch, and for as long as he was with us, we could always depend on having soup for our new meal. Mike got so desperate he called the cook in and asked him if he would please change his menu because everyone was tired of soup. But he replied that as long as he was the cook, we would get soup for lunch. I think we were all quite relieved when he left us. As a result of these types of incidents, a regular procedure was set up for accepting workers, and we were much more careful to investigate those who wanted to come to work. I had just read in one of Amy Carmichael's books where she had written, "Guard your gates well." I brought the passage to Mike and he agreed that our gates indeed needed guarding. Other problems developed that first winter. Difficulties with some of our staff brought many trials. Some of the workers began to question Mike's leadership, and he went to the Lord about it. He told the Lord he was willing to resign as leader, but before he could resign, it would be necessary for a new leader to be raised up, one who could organize the work in the right way. During this time of testing, God gave Mike a scripture that he would bank on and showed him definitely that he had been chosen for this work. He said Mike should occupy temporarily until such time that God, not man, should remove him. This scripture is found in Isaiah 41, 9 through 15. "Thou whom I have taken from the ends of the earth, and called thee from the chief men thereof, and said unto thee, Thou art my servant. I have chosen thee, and not cast thee away. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. Behold, all they that were incensed against thee shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with thee shall perish. Thou shalt seek them, and shalt not find them, even them that contend with thee. They that war against thee shall be as nothing, and as a thing of naught. For I, the Lord thy God, will hold thy right hand, saying unto thee, Fear not, I will help thee. Fear not, thou worm Jacob, and ye man of Israel. I will help thee, saith the Lord, and thy Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I will make thee a new sharp threshing instrument having teeth. Thou shalt thresh the mountains, and beat them small, and shalt make the hills as chaff. From the time Mike received this promise, we began to see the ones who questioned his leadership begin to leave, one by one, without anyone saying anything to them. It was a time of purging at the garden, and we saw God begin to move on our behalf. We understood that the conditions that people agreed to when coming to live at the garden were unique, and not everyone was cut out for the intensity of the sacrifice. We were all basically living as missionaries in a community, only our mission field was local. Each person had to truly know they had been sent by the Lord to be a part of King's Garden. After the purging season, the nucleus of workers who were left were those who were heart and soul in the work, and God began to send us other workers to take the place of those who left. By now, we had grown wiser concerning accepting workers, and an interviewing committee was formed to talk to all who applied. This team endeavored to ascertain if they were being sent by God. Fortunately, people came who were well trained in their trades and professions, and in love with the Lord. The work of King's Garden was shaken down to a solid foundation upon which we could begin to build. Jim Siebert was a man who was an expert in working with machinery and in engineering. He and his family moved to the garden, and he was of inestimable help in many departments, supervising the boiler construction in the powerhouse, helping to build the radio station, and in many other ways was a tremendous asset. He also served as assistant pastor in our chapels. Ragnar Berggren and his family came to us from Montana. No one ever called him any other name than Rags. He became our first purchasing agent. Later, when a need arose for someone to take over the kitchen, Rags volunteered and served in that capacity until the Lord called him home in April 1951. He was the first worker to pass away while serving at King's Garden. His wife, Maud, was matron in the rest home. But after Rag's homecoming, she went back to her home in Montana. It was a source of great comfort to Mike to have the Lord call his own brother, Vernon, and his family to work at the garden. When we visited Vernon and Doris in Bellingham, we would tell them all about what we were planning to do. After we moved to King's Garden, they came to visit us here, and Vernon began to see the great need of workers, and gradually the Lord began to speak to them about coming and helping. They saw God working miracles for them so that their bills could all be paid and they would be free to come. Vernon came expecting to work in the tool department, but it did not take long until he became business manager. He continued in this work until he became assistant to the president. Mike often told me how thankful he was that Vernon was working at the garden because he was so dependable. These and other workers of this caliber began to move into the garden, and the work began to grow. Mike realized, too, that since the work of King's Garden had mushroomed so fast, it was necessary to shore up the organizational operations. A committee was formed for each department to help the head of that department run the work. Many of the people assigned to take charge of a department were inexperienced and needed guidance. Mike was given the scripture in Proverbs 11:14, "Where no counsel is, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors there is safety." He felt this was God guiding him to surround these leaders with a committee to counsel them. For the first few years, the entire team at King's Garden also met together once a month to discuss any problems they had and to hear reports from each department. However, after the work had grown to large proportions and there were many workers, it was much harder to bring them all together every single month. These workers' business meetings began to be held once or twice a year. One of the departments that was opened after the rest home was underway was the laundry. This is part of the work that goes on year after year without much attention being focused on it, but it is a very necessary part of the garden. Laundry for the rest home and for the boys and girls dormitories is processed in the same place where Furland had their laundry, on the top floor of the powerhouse. Many of our people did not have cars, and we felt it necessary to have a church service on the ground for those who desired a local meeting place. Many visitors came to the King's Garden from some distance away and enjoyed attending church on the grounds. So we organized the King's Garden Chapel. The chapel then extended a call to Reverend Alan Inglis and offered the role of service chaplain. He accepted the call, and he and his family moved to the garden in January 1951. Everyone loved him, and he was Pastor Al to the entire garden. Vanny, his wife, served as supervisor of women for many years. We encouraged our workers to go to the church of their choice and to remain with whatever denomination they were affiliated with. We did not wish to compete with other churches, but rather to be a help to them. Therefore, those who had transportation went to other churches, and there were comparatively few workers at the garden services. Yet the chapel was well filled. There were families living near the garden who attended regularly, and the number of our workers who made the garden chapel their church home. Once the housing for teens was established, we also required the boys and girls in our dormitories to attend church at the garden on Sunday evenings. Mike felt that we should attend church at the garden because it gave him a good opportunity to meet many of the visitors. A King's Garden Incorporated board began to meet regularly once a month at the garden. As the years went on, these members rotated in and out as some of the board members resigned and others were added to take their places. It was a great responsibility for the 7 men. There were so many problems to solve, and at every meeting, the members would kneel, and each one would pray for wisdom and guidance as they discussed the various matters brought to their attention. Mike was inexperienced in guiding such a large institution, and sometimes he made mistakes, but God was very close to him. He was able to receive from the Lord the leading and help which he so greatly needed. One day the Lord revealed to him that he should report for duty each day to his heavenly master. He reminded him that when he worked for the Richfield Oil Company, the most important appointment he had was with his district manager. Now that Mike was working for the Lord, the most important appointment of the day was with him. God told him that he should spend 1 hour each morning receiving orders from him. Mike was led to choose the hour between 9 and 10 a.m., and for years he set this time aside to be alone with the Lord. It took something very important for him to break the rule. I went to work at 9 in the morning, so the house was empty and quiet as he met the Lord in this way. During this time, the Lord gave him very explicit instructions, and it was in this way Mike was given the wisdom he needed for the immense task of running King's Garden. I knew my place of service was to help Mike with the office work, but I felt I should do something in addition to the office work to show the other staff members I was willing to do physical work too. As I prayed, the Lord showed me that I could prepare breakfast on Sunday mornings, which would allow the workers in the kitchen department to sleep in. Not being experienced in cooking for a large group, I was rather at a loss as to how to proceed. Finally, I told Mike he should go to a bakery on Saturday afternoon and get some pastries, and I would serve that with cold cereal and bananas. This plan worked very well, and I continued to get breakfast on Sunday for some months, serving the same menu each Sunday. This has never been changed, and to this day, the menu for Sunday breakfast is pastries, cold cereal, and bananas. In the last few years, Mike would refer to this experience in a joking way, saying that I had certainly made my imprint on the culture of King's Garden by establishing the menu for Sunday breakfast. Our working staff has continued to be somewhat fluid. Many people come to us as workers, but after being in the missionary atmosphere of this organization and hearing missionary speakers, they received a call from God to go out as missionaries to the foreign field or to other Christian service at home. Though we miss them greatly, we do not hinder them in any way from going. Rather, we do all we can to help them raise their support and supply their outfits for their new service. We have grown so much in our organizational operations since those first months when we simply said yes to anyone who volunteered to serve. Well, I truly believe every person who had the opportunity to put their hands to plow at King's Garden, whether their time was short or long, was blessed by the Lord. I also believe that many came excited to serve, but once they realized what their yes meant, they grew weary. All in all, that season helped us all to learn how to steward better the workers God brought to us. We learned how not to strive in the flesh, but by the grace of the Lord, to be gentle in our leadership to all men.